Hi, so it's been a very long time since I've done a video, but in this one, given everything that's going on right now, I'd like to try and take us back to a time before the current pandemic situation and look at some footage that I shot all the way back in early January. I shot this in Norway, which prompted the question for this video. Well, Norway's been really great for EVs, but does that answer everything? Is that the whole problem? Or do we need to think about things like e-bikes? So for the last sort of 6 months, I've been riding e-bikes here in Denmark after moving from the UK, and I'd like to talk about that in this video. I realise it's been a very long time since I posted, and the world is very different now, and trying to think about anything that might come after the current situation seems very difficult. I hope you're keeping well. I hope you, your friends, your family, your colleagues are well. Things are relatively okay for us here in Denmark. One of my children has gone back to school. Things are possibly reopening sometime soon. We don't really know. It's difficult to think about anything but the current situation, but maybe this video is a way of just thinking about other things for a little bit. Hopefully it's of some interest to you as well in this current time where you may be sort of stuck at home, sheltering at home and so on. So whatever happens with the current situation, the issue of how we get around in more sustainable ways with kind of zero tailpipe emissions is going to remain important. That kind of challenge is not solved. This is something I think still needs to be talked about a little bit. I don't want to make out that it's the most important thing right now, but I thought it was worth coming back and trying to make some videos about that. And towards the end of this video, I've got some other thoughts as well about things that I can do now here in Denmark that might be of interest. So I'm going to sort of float a few ideas and see what you think. So in what seems like a very long time ago now, back when I was still in my workplace, in mid to late January, I had a trip to Norway. I've been thinking on this channel about ways of, some sort of stopgap between walking, cycling and electric cars, given that it looks now for the foreseeable future I won't be buying an EV in Denmark to replace the IONIQ Electric that I used to have back in the UK. But for me, e-bikes have been this excellent kind of stopgap. They allow me to commute, they allow me to do some kind of recreation with my family and get around, and it doesn't wear me out, it doesn't make me sweat and so on. I've now put something like 2,500 kilometers across 2 e-bikes that I bought back in November 2019. That would be a lot more, obviously. I was commuting something like 100 kilometers a week, taking my son to kindergarten on my cargo bike that I have. And since the whole current situation, because we're not locked down in the same way as other countries here in Denmark, I've been just cycling to kind of stay fit and kind of get a bit of outdoor air and fresh air and so on, just very nearby on the other e-bike that I've got, this Buzzroar E250. But let's return to Norway now. So I've made videos about trips to Norway before because I've had work reasons to go to Norway in the past, and there's just EVs everywhere, and something above 50% of new sales of cars in Norway are now EVs, full battery electric vehicles, no hybrids and things included in that, full battery electric vehicles. And this seems like a success story. Per capita, I think Norway has the biggest uptake of EVs so far in the whole kind of story of the current phase of EVs around the world. But what about e-bikes? So there's a number of things that you might think, okay, that won't work. Norway, fairly cold most of the year. One of the biggest YouTubers from Norway on EVs, Bjorn Nyland, has said that several times. It's like 6 months of the year is a kind of winter and summer is like a green winter, he's joked before. Bicycles and even e-bikes there, how does that work? And then with all this sort of uptake of EVs and expanding charger networks and things like that, and various sort of concessions for EVs in Norway, what have they done about other forms of transport? Has that kind of solved it all, or is it a more kind of multimodal situation where they've done things for e-bikes? So first of all, I'd just like to say in like mid to late January in Kristiansand in Norway, I was surprised to see any bikes at all. It was a rather sort of cold and rainy few days that I was there, and there were bikes. And I was quite surprised that there's quite a bit of biking infrastructure. Here in Denmark, there's cycle lanes almost everywhere, certainly in Aarhus Denmark where I am. And there were quite a few actually around Kristiansand, more than I recall seeing in Oslo, weirdly. That's the only 2 places I've visited in Norway, is Oslo, sort of the capital, and then Kristiansand, which is kind of central south on the kind of curve of Norway. And the reason I was kind of interested in this is the EV uptake in Norway is amazing. I've made videos just about EV spotting in Oslo, Norway, because it's just an incredible thing to see when you come from some other part of the world and suddenly come there where that's normal to have like almost every other car you see is an EV. And then you sort of go back home and think, well, okay, Norway's done something very differently. But of course, cars still have, space requirements, they still cause traffic and congestion, and it's still a lot of resources and materials to use to transport typically 1 or 2 people around. And yet at the same time, not everyone, myself included, is likely or able to sort of jump to just bicycles straight away. So e-bikes is this nice stopgap. I certainly would never have kind of gone straight from an EV to a bicycle. I tried that actually with a rental bicycle here in Denmark and just fell short. It was horrible. It just reminded me of what bicycles were like when I was a child, and I just don't have the energy or the patience or the willingness to go through all the hassle and hardship of that just to get around. So for me, e-bikes have been that kind of solution to keep going with that with a much lower footprint. But of course it does depend very much on kind of technical infrastructure, so having safe cycle lanes and that kind of thing, and provision of that, and a kind of social technology of people have the kind of etiquette and the laws in place to look out for cyclists and in certain situations give priority at junctions and things, just generally so you feel safe and it works and people don't get into accidents all the time. So it was quite clear, even in Kristiansand, which looked as if it had some cycle infrastructure, and I went into a cycle shop where I could see electric bikes on sale, and there were sort of a few, 2 or 3 bicycle shops selling e-bikes, even in the middle of winter in a city in Norway. And they did have e-bikes, and there was particularly interesting was there was this kind of underground secure parking area for bicycles in the centre of the city. But at the same time, things were very much dominated, even in that same car park, by provision for EVs, not necessarily for bikes or e-bikes. So that was interesting to see, but the bias was still towards EVs. So we see things like parking spots with various levels of charging for electric car, for instance. And yet the kind of e-bike thing was sort of tucked away. It had cameras, but it was kind of tucked away as a bit of a kind of side interest in this car park. Nice to see it there anyway, but it was a bit of a side interest. There were cycle lanes actually signposted. I think it's particularly because Kristiansand is a university city, so there's provision that seems to be geared towards getting people to and from, getting their commute done to the university. So there were some fairly nice, attractive, well laid out, well provisioned kind of cycle lanes there, which I was quite surprised to see. And then there were protected, separated lanes on some of the city streets as well in the city centre. And I did see a number of different variants of bicycle around, nothing like what I see here in Denmark, where you see every form of cycle you can possibly imagine. It's almost like being in the Netherlands or something, the huge various forms of cargo bikes and other kind of bikes. So I saw some slightly unusual ones there. And down by the harbour, actually, I did notice, again, it was a cold time of year, that there was a cargo bike there with studded tyres. So I know, again, from Bjorn Nilon's YouTube videos about his Teslas, that, he has studded tyres in the winter. Sometimes some different forms of tyre with metal studs or just sort of rubberized almost studs. And apparently you can get bicycles with those kind of things for getting around when it's kind of like icy or snowy conditions in Norway. So that was interesting to see. So clearly it is possible to get around, and people have adapted by doing that. I haven't tried by myself because we've had fairly mild weather here in Denmark. A lot of rain, actually, and to kind of go off on a tangent for a minute, we had quite bad floods here. I think like the UK and other places had problems just after Christmas with floods. It seems like a distant memory now, I know, with other things going on. But the lakes that aren't too far away from where we live here were completely flooded out, and that flooded the cycle lanes and the roads and other things. And there's been some very, very light snow. So, it's not that I've been cycling in ideal conditions. I did say my plan with e-bikes was to try it at one of the hardest times of year to see if that was feasible, in the cold, in the wet, in the dark. And that's continued. I've ridden it through rain and wind and light snow and darkness and cold and that, and it's been fine. You get used to it. And it's certainly a lot easier, I think, than riding a kind of analog bicycle through that, because at least you don't have all those environmental conditions plus the kind of huge effort and toil and sweat on top of that as well. And again, this was months ago, so I don't know what the current situation is. It might be that more people are taking up biking. I don't know the exact lockdown conditions in Norway. I think a bit like here in Denmark, things are starting to open up a little bit again. But I did talk to some shop owners, and they were saying that, there's a problem with congestion in these cities, even though a lot of the cars are EVs. You still get congestion and traffic, and there were some road closures coming up, I think, in Kristiansand, that people were looking maybe to get bicycles as a way around that, to get around the construction and some congestion and things. So clearly people thinking about it, but it was very low level. I don't know what it'll be like now, in the whole kind of pandemic situation. But it was nice to see that it looked possible. Again, as an aside, I was walking around Kristiansand and saw this issue of someone trailing their charger cable across the pavement, which in various kind of social media settings people seem to get palpitations about in the UK. But it's quite clear here, and I saw it and I just stepped over it. so no problem. It's a bit weird, of course, looking back at this footage, which I haven't looked at for a while. I've been completely distracted with other things, and just my focus has been elsewhere, and I wasn't even sure whether to restart making videos. But it's quite weird to look at sort of travel footage. It was a work trip, but still travel footage, not knowing when that might be possible again. And it was pretty lousy weather most of the time I was there, but still, yeah, it's difficult to think right now when kind of conditions might resume for travel and what that will look like and so on. But yeah, minor issue, I suppose. Yeah, similarly, it's weird to look back at, airplanes, airports, and weird, oversized airport shopping. Yeah, weird. It reminds me why I haven't really been back to this footage, because it does feel a little bit irrelevant given everything that's going on right now. But, at the time it was an interesting experience, and I'm kind of sharing it here now. One thing to note in Norwegian airports is that you'll see adverts for like Porsche EVs, the Taycan, and just sort of flashed up on the airport screens as I was walking around. I don't know if you see that in UK or US airports, but Norway being the big EV place that it is, you see that. Don't see anything to do with bicycles, of course. It's kind of like luxury goods kind of advertising in an airport, I guess. Yeah, Norway is great for EVs, I think. It's quite remarkable. I think having spoken to more and more people in Norway, it's not the kind of solely environmental story that maybe most of the world thinks of with EVs in Norway. And still everything is heavily focused around road infrastructure. At work, I've come across a number of kind of official reports from transport research bodies in Norway about EVs. So I might delve into a few of those in future, because it's quite surprising how it's advanced in many ways, but perhaps not too far ahead of places like the UK and others in terms of like average charging speed for people who are not in Teslas and so on. It's not that different from other places when you come down to the kind of data and the nuts and bolts of it, but still very much a place focused around roads and cars, be they EVs or whatever. And it's clearly a lot of scope for e-bikes, and that's something I'm particularly interested in right now. I'm not sure whether I'm going to bother getting an EV. It doesn't seem to be necessary right now. It doesn't seem to be sensible use of money in this particular time to put down such a big chunk of money on something like that. Sort of personal updates then, I guess. I managed to get our place sorted out at the start of the year. Again, this seems like a very long time ago now. I was wandering around IKEA and stuff back when that was possible, sort of late December, January, getting our sort of rental place here kind of, fit for the family. So we're fairly kind of settled now. Generally, things are okay. I know the situation around the world varies from place to place, and I'm very concerned about that, and very concerned that people are okay. In Denmark, we're sort of possibly through the kind of worst of the phase one. Things are starting to reopen up. It seems like, the kind of infection rate has gone back up since they started opening some of the schools and things again. So I guess everything will have to be very careful and cautious. And with that in mind, I'm just curious the kind of things, the kind of videos I can make that you might like to watch that might kind of, lift your spirits a little bit. One of the things I can do, because we're not locked down here fully, we can still go out in kind of safe ways and away from people and social distancing. I can make kind of just sort of cycle tour videos. I've been discovering quite a nice few places a few kilometers from my house, all sorts of different forms of countryside and riding, and been experimenting with some AV equipment to do that. I've had this kind of road mic for a while, but I don't normally use it. But it turns out if I kind of cover it with a couple of layers of bicycle clothing, I can get reasonable audio while cycling without the typical kind of wind noise you'd expect from cycling. And on the e-bike, I can just sort of tour around quite nice kind of short circuits through some pretty places and get reasonably nice footage. So I've got quite hooked myself on kind of slow TV and looking at, people walking or driving in places that Lord only knows when I'll visit again. And that could be something I could make on this channel, some sort of zero tailpipe emissions kind of slow TV, maybe with some narration, maybe with not, of going around a few kind of places with a kind of multi GoPro kind of angles set up on the bike. And I've been trying that, and these two bikes that I've got offer a kind of different riding experience, ride along, some with my children, some just with me. So that could be something that could be done. I also intend to do maybe reviews separately of the two bikes that I've got. I'm not sure when I'll get around to that exactly, but I will do that, given that I've now put, like I say, 2,500 kilometers on them, which is quite a lot for someone who hasn't cycled for like 30 or more years before coming to Denmark. And it's only the e-bike thing that I've got interested in, from coming from the EV world that's made me do that. And I plan to do a video on, just what's that like? What's that been like? 2,500 kilometers, since I kind of gave up my IONIQ EV life. What's it been like to kind of just switch that for 2,500 kilometers on two different e-bikes? So I'm going to give some reflections on that. And I think, having come to it all from an EV world and from the IONIQ, I'm interested in efficiency, and I'm still interested in how to try and not give up the various kind of features and comforts and functions of an EV when you jump to something that's completely different, which is, two-wheel bicycle or so on. So I'm interested in kind of that middle ground, I think, between cycles and full EVs, cars. And there seems to be a lot of innovation in that space right now. Nothing that's fully come to market, but a lot of things that are kind of under development that might have kind of potential for the future. One I've shown before, the kind of Velo Armadillo from Sweden. There's also the kind of biohybrid in Germany, and a number of other things in that kind of space of the kind of four-wheel bicycle with electric assistance, with some sort of cover and various things that are a bit car-like, but still keeping many of the benefits of being like a bicycle. So you don't need insurance, and you don't need registration, and you can ride on bicycle lanes, but you've still got some things a bit more car-like. So I might do some sort of more systematic thoughts on that and comparing features of different forms of transport as I see them. And then, I think kind of longer term, there's kind of like ride-along, slow TV type e-bike videos might be nice, because I've been really stunned at just, you can cycle everywhere here, and it's a really, I find it very relaxing. It's been mainly what I've been doing when I've been off camera, and you haven't seen me making videos here. I've been out doing that, enjoying it tremendously, going with the family and so on, always maintaining the safe social distance and so on. Things are still relatively okay. I don't feel obviously like in a normal state of mind. I'm sure you can understand that yourselves. So, but we've been doing things as best as we can, and there's clearly some videos I can make for the future of the channel. Whether that will look quite different, I might maybe start filming in the shed with some lights to kind of light up the bikes and everything, give it more of a bike theme. I'm not a big fan of the kind of typical bike videos. So if you look on YouTube at kind of EVs, you see people sat in cars talking about it, driving, standing outside it. If you look at bicycles, people typically are in full kind of body gear, or they're in a bicycle workshop. That seems to be the kind of two stalls of where these kind of YouTube contents, end up sitting. I'm not really in either of those. I did used to sit in my EV when that was appropriate, when I had it. So I'm not really sure what to do with that, to kind of give it a bit of a different flavour, maybe make it clear what the videos are about from the outset by sitting in an appropriate location. But at the same time, I'm not into kind of getting grease all over my fingers and chains and wrenches and all that kind of things. I'm not kind of, that style of hardcore cyclist, really, and that's never going to be anything I'm about. And I think that's what's special about e-bikes. You don't need to be that full-on into it and, enthusiastic and, peak of fitness and knowing how to fix everything on your own bike and so on. I see e-bikes much more like going towards the kind of lower maintenance and easier convenience of the EV world, actually. So it's a different thing, and maybe I'll think about doing something differently with that and framing it slightly differently. So it's important, I think, if I'm going to go down that road, to do it in a kind of fresh way, make it look, dedicated and specific to that so people know what they're watching. But let me know what you think. I mean, please feel free to say hi in the comments. I've been wondering how all you are doing. Thanks for the comments that have been wondering how we're doing, but we, as I say, we are fine. So please feel free to leave some comments and thoughts about what you think should come on the Zero Tailpipe channel. I don't know when things are going to reopen normally, as to when I can do sort of EV test drives and that kind of thing. I'm not too keen on the idea of like renting EVs through GoMore or the other services here, where I might get into different forms of EV. I did see a Fluence the other day, a Renault Fluence, one of the very early EVs, somewhere over in that direction when I was cycling, just cycling along. And that's the beauty of the cycling, is you're going a bit slower than you would in a car, so I spotted it. So clearly someone quite close to here has got a Renault Fluence, so that would be interesting to just look at and talk to them about. But that obviously requires the current conditions to change, and for things to be more open. So we'll just see how that goes and just take it bit by bit. And but yeah, trying to get back into it a bit. Hope you enjoyed this video, a bit all over the place as I know. I'll try to make the future ones a bit more focused. Hope you're doing well, hope you stay well and sort of keep well. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in future videos. Take care, and bye for now.
I'll just go.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go steady and then you just cycle up to me, yeah?
With first gear right now, I'm going up to 2.
Okay.